Hi there. I'm going to try to do a video about making biscuits. Now these aren't just any kind of biscuits. These are Southern beet biscuits. You know, most biscuits are, you kind of cut in the fat into it and kind of like a muffin would start. But these are my mom's and her family's recipe. And instead of doing that, you actually make your dough and you stir in the oil or grease later. And it makes a different kind of biscuit, so it's a little bit flatter, it should be. Mine are often pointed, but just makes almost fries in its own grease in the pan. So it makes a really tasty biscuit that often is served with red-eye gravy or streaked gravy, which is another video. I'm still working on that one. This is my recipe. And you can see I was just a little girl when I wrote it, and my handwriting hasn't gotten much better. But it has interesting things, because as I was watching my mom make biscuits that day, you know, she had measuring cups, but she used Vienna sausage cans for her measuring and to cut out her biscuits. So I think might be a little bigger than the can that she used. It's probably more like I don't know, maybe a tomato paste can, but you want something that holds a slight cup of flour, between maybe 2/3 cup of flour. And then she always sifted her ingredients, and I keep my flour in a container like this in the drawer in the kitchen, rather than a sack, because it makes it really handy. I don't do a lot of baking now that the kids are gone, but I like it handy when I do want to bake. I don't want any bugs to be in it, or you could stick this in the freezer if it's going to be a long time, or in the fridge, but it keeps really good just in the drawer as long as it's sealed with the cover. It's always handy when you're ready. Another thing I have today is my bowl of water with my dishcloth in it right here in the sink. That's going to help me clean up things really fast and just keeps the counters nice, especially if you put a little soap and a tiny bit of bleach in there these days. Today I have my orange juice because breakfast is late today and I need a little energy, and you know, presentation is everything these days, so keep your own blood sugar up. Okay, let's get started. My mom always sifted her flour. Now, to be truthful, this is a sifter, a flour sifter. It gets the lumps out of your flour and just gets a very light, fluffy flour. Probably makes your biscuits a little lighter. I will be honest, I rarely sift my flour. I just get some flour out and stir up some biscuits, but I'm going to use it today because maybe this is why my biscuits have pointed tops. Who knows? So we'll do that, because these biscuits should be kind of flat. Okay, so I'm going to start with the 2 cans of flour. Again, this is about a cup of flour each. Maybe a slight cup. If you get a little extra flour in them, I don't think that would be the end of the world. I'm going to keep this out because I'm going to need flour to make these out, and I'm going to use this to cut them. I always keep my measuring cup in the flour, because if I'm measuring something out, I just leave a clean measuring cup in there. This one I don't leave in, but today I am for right now. So I've got my two basically cups of flour. I'm going to put a level tablespoon of baking powder. Now you can see this baking powder, I don't use it a lot, and my mom would always say, make sure your baking powder is good. You don't want what she would call terrapins, hard hockey puck like biscuits. Here's a level tablespoon of baking powder in there. I'm not worried about my baking powder because I've already tried it on another recipe and I lost the lid for it somehow. I keep this in the fridge. Now my mom didn't keep stuff like that in the fridge, and so I imagine her baking powder would have gone bad if she'd ever kept it that long, but she used hers up pretty quick. So I keep mine in the fridge, and I can bake anytime I want. Most of the time it seems to be fine. And then we need a half a teaspoon of salt. Now, this is a teaspoon measure, just for fun. I'll show you how my mom did it. that and then just throw it in. Let's see how close I am. Pretty good. Maybe a little more. It probably would have worked though. Okay, there's our half a teaspoon of salt. Okay. Now I have a wet paper towel here because I am so messy, and I just vacuumed the floors, and I know I'm going to get flour on the floors, but that's okay. A damp paper towel will take care of that pretty quick. So we got our dry ingredients, and she says sift them together, so we'll do that. I think that just lightens the flour. This is especially important if you're making cakes from scratch, which I don't do very often. You can see there's a few little hard things in there, and then we always just give it a little tap like that to get the extra flour off. I'm not going to dump anything I don't want in there, like those little hard pieces in there, and I'm just going to set this over here to rinse it off later. Okay, so now I have a nice light flour mixture here, and the baking powder and the salt is well distributed in there. Probably is going to make a better biscuit. The next thing we do, and I need something to stir with. I'm going to use this because it cleans up easy. My mom would have just found a really sturdy utility spoon like that. I'll get it out in case I need it. And she's going to say, add and stir about a cup of milk. Now, about is important because here is the magic. This is where you have to just know what the dough is supposed to look like and stop when it gets there. So I'm going to pour in all but about a fourth a cup of this. And I'm going to start stirring this up. You can see it's collecting the moisture. But you see how it's just kind of not all blending together, so I think we do need a little more milk, so I'm going to put some in there. I want a really soft dough that I can incorporate the grease into. It's just the backwards way you're taught in home ec of doing things. And now she says, put in a couple tablespoons of bacon grease. Now, I don't have bacon grease in my cupboard all the time like my mom did. She went through it so fast. We did a lot of breakfasts, and her bacon grease didn't go rancid because she just used it up so fast. If I had bacon grease, I'd have to keep it in the fridge to keep it from going rancid. So you can do that, but I think bacon grease really is the secret to these, because it does give them the grease that comes off of frying bacon. It gives them such a nice flavor. But I don't have bacon grease, and so we're doing actually ham this morning, which would make really good red-eye gravy. But I'm going to just use some melted Crisco, and Crisco is going to be so important. You can use oil. I'm sure you would get a pretty good biscuit, but it may be something about the Crisco that makes it be so good. That melted Crisco with bacon fried in it. So I just melted a little Crisco. I'm going to add this 2 tablespoons to my dough. I'm holding it up here so you can see it. Now this is the part where you might need that other spoon. My mom would say, she'd actually grab the bowl like this, whether she's making donuts or biscuits, and she'd say, just beat that until it looks kind of shiny. That's the word she would use. So see, it should look kind of shiny. And one of the things you're doing here is you're probably stretching the gluten in this, and kind of like you would for yeast bread. But for some reason, I don't know if it's the milk in it, this does not make a tough bread like it would if you did this to muffins. So I'm going to stir it. My mom had muscles. My mom started making biscuits like this when she was 10 years old, standing on a chair. Her mother had a stroke in her 30s after having her 5th child. My mom was the oldest. And my grandmother actually couldn't get up and make biscuits for the family, and so my mother took over that job at 10 years old, standing on a chair in the kitchen so she could reach things. So she made biscuits for her 7 siblings and her parents, and then her mother eventually was able to take over the job with her one good arm. But then she grew up and had her own family and had 6 children, and we all got to enjoy those wonderful biscuits. Okay. I don't know if that's shiny enough. Let me see if you can see it. But I'm going to call that good. It's a nice soft dough. It's very sticky, and that's what you want. And that's why you keep your flour out here, because I don't know if you ever buy these little cutting boards that are just kind of flexible. I just like them. They don't take up a lot of room. I'm going to actually make my biscuits out on that today. You notice I never used quite all the milk. You don't want such a sticky dough. You can't work with it, so you just kind of have to go with a soft dough. So I'm going to put some flour on this little thing. This is all going to clean up really fast. And if I behave myself, maybe I'll keep it off me in the floor. Now I'm going to put that dough, scrape it out here onto this. And here's where it can get a little messy, because here's where you got to put your tools down and get your hands in the job here. So I'm going to get as much of this dough out as I can. I'm going to put that in the sink and let it start. Because you know what happens when you mix flour and water? You get glue, right? Let's take some of that flour. Get your fingers in the flour so that it doesn't stick to you. I'm done with this now. And I'm just going to take a little, I don't want to get too much flour. I just want to get enough I can handle this. And I'm just going to basically pat this dough out. Just kind of turned it over just enough so it's not so sticky I can't touch it. I'm going to pat this out to about maybe a 1/2 inch thick. This just makes enough biscuits for 2 or 3 people. If you're going to make this for a good sized family or boys, growing boys, you're going to need twice this much. You're going to need to double this. But I suggest you start with this because it's kind of an art to get the feel of the dough, and sometimes when you start doubling and tripling the recipe, you may not come out with as good a result. So make sure you've got the feel for the dough before you start trying to make it big. Okay, now got this spread out about as far as I can. Don't want it too thin. What about that thick? Now, because my Vienna sausage can, you can use any kind of cutter, but it's just nice to have everything here. I'm just going to cut out my biscuits, and you see they're very flat, and that's how we want them. Getting a little more flour in there so they don't stick. So these are going to raise up a little when they cook. You don't raise them up ahead of time. Remember, this is not a yeast bread. This is a quick bread. And then I've got, and this is really key. I'm going to bring this over. I've got this pan ready, and this pan already has grease on it. It's kind of hardened now. I melted some grease. I'm going to get just a little more grease on it, because I think the key to this is cooking them in a very hot oven. In fact, let me go over here. Oh, see, I failed you. The very first thing it says is preheat your oven to 475. Now you're going to say 475? Man, that's hot. It is. And I'm going to do it right now so this will be ready. Let's see. I'm doing the upper oven. Bake. Now my oven cooks a little hot, so I'm going to do 450 and hope that's hot enough. Mom said that when they cook on wood stoves, you knew when your oven was ready for biscuits is that you would you'd open the door and wave your arm in, and if your hair prickled on your arm, you knew it was hot enough for biscuits. So these cook at a very hot temperature, so you got to really watch them. They're going to be done in just a short amount of time, just minutes. and you're going to have to watch them, and when right before you take them out, kind of check the bottoms to be, take a fork and lift up the bottom, make sure they're a little bit brown on the bottom and just barely getting golden, and then you're going to turn the broiler on for a while just to make the tops a little bit golden brown. So anyway, back where I was. So what we want is, I'm just going to take a little of this clean tissue and put a little bit more of this grease on here, because you want a lot of grease. I'm not really frying them, we just want them really crispy. We used to say at our house, Mom, make them have brown bottoms, because they were kind of crunchy and crispy, and they really tasted good with eggs and jam and butter and some kind of breakfast meat like ham. Now I'm going to take these biscuits and I'm going to get some of that excess flour off of them, because we just want them to be light. We don't want them to be all dry and full of flour. Let's put them about that far apart. This is a nice big fat one. Probably got a little too fat on them. They're probably a little bit uneven. They should be all the same size. Some of these are a little thinner, but oh well. My sister should be the one doing this. She makes biscuits just like my mom's. I've never been able to, but we'll come up with something that we'll enjoy. Now I think I can get one more biscuit out of this one. It's going to be a little odd shape, but that's okay. Just us folks, right? Now I'm going to take these little pieces that are left over and just kind of mash them together with my hands. I think I can get a couple more biscuits out of that. Pat, 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 pat. There's another one. And let's just do this one the way they used to do it. They would just form them with their hands. Not quite as uniform, but just okay. So we got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. We got 10 biscuits out of that. Now, there's grease on the bottom. Now we need some grease on the tops. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to take some of this melted grease. Again, this would be bacon grease if you were doing these in the South. But this just is supposed to kind of help the tops not split, I think. Although mine always do. And might give them a little bit of a nice golden color on top. Keeps them soft. Okay, here you are. That's the process. Yes, you are going to get your hands in the thing, and actually I've done pretty good. I kept most of my mess on there, and so far not much on the floor. So as soon as that says we're ready, and my goodness, I guess this small oven heats up fast because it says we're there. We're going to stick these in the oven for about, I'd say start checking them in 6 minutes, 6 to 8 minutes. We'll see. Okay, I'll be back. Okay, these have been here about 6 to 7 minutes maybe, so you really want to watch them carefully. I think they cooked a little faster because of this small oven. It might take 8 minutes in your big oven. Just watch them after 6 minutes just to be safe. First thing I did is I lifted the bottoms to be sure that they were getting brown. And once I see them getting brown on the bottoms, with that little crispy golden look on the bottom, then I turned off the oven and turned the broil on, and I stood right here, just like you saw me, and watched them broil. When I see, took about 3 minutes maybe to get that look is what I want. And they could be a little browner on the bottom, but I didn't want them to get too tough in the oven, so I wanted to be tender. So I'm going to take those out now, and I'm going to turn off the broil. Let's cancel that. Okay, so there you have it. Southern beet biscuits. You want to eat these right out of the oven. Have all the rest of your breakfast ready and warm. These should be the last thing to come out, and my mom would put them on a plate, slide them out onto a plate and bring them to the table. And we would have them with homemade butter and homemade jam. My dad used to do something when he was home for breakfast on the weekends. He would mix his butter and jam up with a fork on a clean plate, and then we would pass our plates to him, and he would give us a little bit of that mixture on our plate, and we would use it to, what they used to say, sop up or fork it onto our biscuits. So I don't know where that tradition came from, probably somewhere in the Scotch-Irish background of the hill country people, but that's kind of a fun way to do it. So happy baking. I hope you enjoy that. And this is Palm Sunday, and I hope you have the Lamb of God in your home